Now, let me do a little something for you here to round off the show. And since it's Wednesday, I want to go on a positive note and do something fun for you. As I mentioned at the start of the program, I get to know a writer who's was a terrific writer, and started off as a teen fan of other types of writers that are more in the cosmic horror vein, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Bloch, and those folks. His name was Brian Lumley. So we're going to take the opportunity now to shift over into fiction mode, go with booktube action, and think about those days when I got to spend that time at the Outer Limits and Star Trek Voyager. And we're going to go with our moment to discuss Wednesday, Wordsmith Wednesday, with the control voice.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, the Outer Limits. Yay, Outer Limits. Great stuff. I want to thank Billy Ray Valentine for sending me some cool stuff that made me think of the Outer Limits in the Twilight Zone today. And we're going to be able to show you some of that later. Some very cool stuff. Billy Ray, you're awesome. And I want to thank William and Ferb and Angie and all you guys inside the chat, MOE, Centurion Blood. That's such a great name. Inside the Rumble chat. Melanie is there. All the best to you, Melanie. All the best to everybody. Let's get right into it for this Wordsmith Wednesday as we get ready to close off October and Halloween is coming up. Don't forget, think about some spooky stories on Halloween. I'm going to ask you some short stories. Tell me about the short stories that really scared you, that sort of thing, whether it's movies or print, that sort of deal. Even audio stories. I used to listen to audio stories. They were terrific, great stuff. Now, I want to talk about a guy I met many, many times, both in the United States and in England, originally from the UK. Strong, rugged guy. And I did not know him when I first started reading his stuff. And I was really pulled in by the cover of one of his most famous novels. If you go to my Substack, the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, and if you're over watching us now on BookTube, on former Star Trek Writing Fellow channel, I do the Liberty Conspiracy every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m., where we talk about political things and economics from a libertarian voluntarist standpoint. And we break apart news of the day, that sort of thing. But on Wednesdays and Fridays, I try to get into some fiction and think about my time writing television scripts and things like that for the Outer Limits and writing prose fiction and things like that. So one of the things that really attracted me was horror fiction. And one of the big horror writers for many, many years was a man named Brian Lumley. You might know him as the great writer of the Necroscope series, the creator of the Titus Crow character. Now, if you're not familiar with these people, Titus Crow is sort of a supernatural detective, and the Necroscope series starts off pretty wild, and it just gets bigger and bigger. It's so cool. So I picked up the Necroscope book many years ago before I knew Brian, and I got to meet his wife a number of times. Didn't know her quite as well, but Brian was a terrific guy. Terrific guy. So if you go over to the news notes at my Gardner Goldsmith Substack, where you'll see mostly Liberty Conspiracy oriented stuff, but I'm going to start populating it with more information on fiction and things like that. You'll see that inside today's news notes, I actually put together something preparatory for tonight's segment for the paid subscribers to the news notes. It's about Brian Lumley. It's a little white paper bio about Brian Lumley. It's part of the news notes today down at the bottom. A little extra something for folks that I thought they might dig. So let me bring it on in here. and give you the word. Brian Lumley, born in 1937. Wow. Before World War II, he died in 2024. As you'll see here, he was a prolific English horror author, renowned for his contributions to the Cthulhu mythos and his epic Necroscope series. I want to show you a picture of Brian. And many of the ladies thought he was quite the handsome guy. And you'll see there, he was born near Newcastle. What a great city. Saw the Damned and Eddie and the Hot Rods in Newcastle. Saw them on the day that they had the funeral for John Peel. Actually, I left the hotel near the train station watching the live coverage in London of the funeral for John Peel. And then I went to see a couple of the bands that he helped give a start, especially the Damned. It was something else. They brought me backstage. I got to meet all the guys and Eddie and the Hot Rods too. It was really fun. So Brian Lumley, great guy. In 22 years as a military policeman, he served in many of the Cold War hotspots. Now this, if you're just listening in audio, this is a resource I often mention. It's fantasticfiction.com. It used to be, originally, it started as fantasticfiction.uk. And when I worked in a bookstore, we utilized this website all the time, .co.uk. And it was great, because they really organized things, and they didn't use AI. They went in and they organized things. Eventually, they had a program that would do it to show all the books by these authors and links to, say, Amazon or Barnes & Noble and used booksellers that might be selling the books. And they would put them in series. They'd give the bios, and on their front page, they would say what's coming up this month. Just great. Much better than Goodreads. So much better than Goodreads. And Goodreads is fun, but Fantastic Fiction is just great because you really start to get to know these people. They don't put up reviews from people, but you can, as you see here, you can follow an author, you can click on books and you know, put it on your wish list, on your own personal wish list and stuff like that. So I put together these notes about Mr. Lumley because I always enjoyed talking with Brian. He was just always a wonderful guy. And he was one heck of a tough dude. He was in the military, in the British military. And what's really interesting is when you read this first book, and I'll show it to you in just a minute, and what a cover it had, you'll see that the first Necroscope book, you get an idea a little bit about this guy's bringing something from his own learning in here, like his experience. They always say, you know, you write best what you know best, obviously. And it's in the Cold War. It's in East Berlin. And, you know, he knows the way the Soviet military is working. He knows their procedures. There's a torture thing going on. What is this? He knows the Berlin Wall. I'm like, this guy must have been in the military. I bet he was stationed in Berlin. Well, he was in the military and he was stationed there. And I thought he might have boxed. I haven't seen that confirmed. I spoke to him one time, and I think he did mention to me that he did some boxing. But he also had an amazing interest in mathematics. So let me show you the Necroscope book for real. This is the first Necroscope. You might be familiar with it. Okay, Necroscope, great, great book. Big book, Necroscope, published by Tor. And there's an entire massive series of the Necroscope books. Then there's a whole nother series that's parallel to the Necroscope books that he did. He wrote 50-something novels after he retired from the military, okay? He started writing his short stories when he had time off, when he was, you know, bivouacking somewhere. He might have been in the barracks. I'll give you this bio. He was born in 1937, Brian. He was a prolific English horror writer, renowned for his contributions to the Cthulhu mythos and the epic Necroscope series, blending cosmic dread with action-packed fantasy and some vampiric stuff that sort of hovered as a question. What is this? Is this vampires? What is this? He was born December 2nd, 1937, near Newcastle on Tyne, the river. Lumley discovered his passion for speculative fiction in childhood through British comics like Eagle, featuring Dan Dare, and classics such as Bram Stoker's Dracula. His lifelong fascination with H.P. Lovecraft ignited in his early 20s while stationed in Germany. Devouring Lovecraft's tales, Lumley meticulously collected rare editions. Now, by this time, Lumley had passed away. Lovecraft had passed away. So August Derleth had started up, along with Donald Wandre, had started up Arkham House publishers. So he was reading a lot of the Arkham House stuff. So devouring Lovecraft's tales, Lumley meticulously collected rare editions, often from, you got it, Arkham House, and corresponded with the author's publisher, August Derleth. Now, don't forget, Derleth is the guy who created Solar Ponds, and he had been a fan of Conan Doyle and wanted to write the Conan Doyle stories of Sherlock Holmes, but he couldn't do that as a teenager, so he created Solar Ponds, who now has hundreds of stories, and other writers are writing Solar Pond stories. So it's quite interesting that August Derleth should do that. So again, it sort of ties all these people together during this period of the pulps. You can see how this generation that preceded us had their own outlets. It wasn't necessarily television per se. It was the pulp stories, the writing, the print, that sort of stuff. This led to, yes, as he corresponded with the publisher of Arkham House, August Derleth, one of the two, the main publisher. Derleth pretty much ran it day to day. This led to Brian Lumley's debut publications in Arkham House anthologies, including The Collar of the Black in 1971 and The Horror of Oakdean in 1977, where he emulated and then transcended Lovecraft's archaic prose, crafting original mythos tales like the Dreamlands series. Now, just to let you know, Lovecraft at his best is an incredible writer, but he did get paid by the word. So sometimes his stuff can be a little bit wordy. You have to pick and choose. Like if you read The Color Out of Space, it's great. It's really, really good. That is just amazing. And Pickman's Model also, and just amazing. But Lumley was able to take his fascination with Lovecraft and that colorful prose, that amazing prose, and avoid the occasional stilted purple prose and put it more into an addressable, understandable, direct driving, plot-driven narrative. So he could attenuate it. He was a very skilled writer. Same thing with H.P. Lovecraft, Tom Monteleone. You know, they can go way up in what they want to write and make it incredibly colorful. They can bring it down a little bit and make it more driving. You know, that sort of thing. It's great. Now, Brian Lumley's military career spanned 22 years in the Royal Military Police, enlisting in his early 20s and rising to warrant officer. I remember him telling me about that. I was talking to him down in Las Vegas one time. It was the last time I saw him, actually. He served in Cold War flashpoints, including Berlin and Cyprus, retiring in 1980 as chief instructor at the RMP training depot. So obviously he knew how to fight. He had to know how to fight. And he did. He had boxer hands like my Uncle Dan Butcheroni. I mean, you know, like one of his fingers was as thick as two of my fingers. And, you know, I guess skinny fingers, but he had big, thick fingers. So it was during this period when he was a chief instructor, when he was at these Cold War flashpoints, during his 22 years in the Royal Military Police, during this period that he penned his first stories. And he balanced his military discipline with the outlet of his dark imagination, sort of thinking about these things on his spare time. Though Lumley lacked formal expertise in mathematics, his works feature a great deal of arithmetic, as in the Necroscope's physics calculations, and his larger narratives occasionally nod at mathematical motifs, evoking Pythagoras. There you go with your what would you call that? Alchemical stuff. So he's mixing in the alchemical, weird, occult stuff. So he knew what he was doing. Pythagoras in spectral dialogues. Post-retirement, Brian Lumley authored over 50 books, cementing his legacy until his death on January 2nd, 2024. A self-taught storyteller, he transformed Lovecraftian shadows into vibrant, visceral worlds, influencing generations of horror enthusiasts. So if you go to my news notes, if you're one of the paid subscribers, just to entice you to become genetically superior, to become one of those great people, I have the link to the fantastic fiction thing, and I called it up already. So there's Brian right there. And so he's won the World Fantasy Award, the Stoker Award, and the British Fantasy Award. And yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. So the Titus Crow stories are great. Then you've got the Tales of the Primal Land. You can see some Cthulhu stuff there. Psychomech. This is sort of a spin-off from the Necroscope series. The Dreamlands thing is sort of interwoven with the Necroscope stuff. then look at all the Necroscope books. Just incredible. Vampiri, the source, and the Vampiri cover. This isn't the original Vampiri cover. If you see the original Vampiri cover, it's really, really cool. So what he was able to do, everybody, was he was able to take this sort of extra dimensional Lovecraftian thing of, with Lovecraft, Lovecraft, when he wanted to be scary and spooky, he could be. But when people talk about the cosmic horror, I was never really scared by cosmic horror. Because they said, the idea was, well, it's so incomprehensible, it's scary. It just gets me curious. I want to find out more. If there's something, I was almost went into, cosmology, physics and stuff at Cornell. So that was one of my two choices for universities, and I went to BU instead. But so I've never been like scared by something that I don't understand. I've been curious, but been made curious about those things, inquisitive by those things. But sometimes you could see the effects of these things that they couldn't understand, that Lovecraft would weave into his stories, which were really, really crazy. Like Color Out of Space is great. If you get to see the Nick Cage version of that, kudos to them. Just a wonderful, wonderful depiction of that story. And the premise of the Color Out of Space is that this meteorite lands near this farm of a guy whose last name is Gardner, who comes from just outside of Arkham, which is Salem, Massachusetts. And I've mentioned to people that Arkham is the cipher for Salem, and the Gardner family, my family, was one of the 5 families that founded Salem. So Lovecraft did his research about Boston. He knew the streets. He also knew Salem, a 20-minute drive north of Boston, and he knew that the Gardner family was big in Salem. So he made this guy, the farmer, whose land is the land where this meteorite lands, he named him, his last name is Gardner. And out of this meteorite thing comes this weird, indescribable color of something. It just starts to permeate things. Many people look at it as one of the first examples of like radiation poisoning of an area. And weird things start to happen to the plants. And then weird things start to happen to the people. So it's the effect of the unknown on the people that really is incredibly effective. And the nature around it that Lovecraft just nails it on Color Out of Space. And again, if you want to get probably, I think, the best audio version of that, Tony Santoro of Tales to Terrify. The website's still up, but Tony passed away about 8 years ago. He actually used to live in the area. There was a theater over in where I went to high school, Milford, New Hampshire, and they had a local theater there, but they would get people coming up from New York in the off season, and they would do plays there. And he put on a bunch of plays. I saw Gaslight there with my mom. It was wonderful. And he was the director of the theater then, and I never knew it until years later. He and I corresponded, and I emailed him about a couple of the amazing stories that he had read and someone else had read. So Tony Santoro, remember, look up The Color Out of Space, From Tales to Terrify, and you're going to hear just an amazing reading of that story. Sometime I also want to talk to the other, I think the person who wrote what I think is the other best story on Tales to Terrify, a story which is also Lovecraftian called Triumph by a guy who came from Bosnia named Damir Salkovic. He lives, I think, in the Virginia area now. He's an accountant, and he's got a bunch of stuff published since then. That story, Triumph, just amazing story. It's about 45 minutes long. It's great. But so The Color Out of Space, if you want a good audio version in your car, check it out. Tales to Terrify, get it, and you'll love it. But what I think is really interesting with the Lumley stories is, so if you take the Lovecraftian idea of Cthulhu, the idea that there's something from some other dimension sort of a thing. It's this weird mixture, and he allowed other people to work in the Cthulhu mythos. And so you got August Derleth, and you got other writers who wrote, Robert Bloch, again, the writer of Psycho. They would dabble in this world, and they created other things other than the Cthulhu monster god thing. There were others like Nyarlathotep and things like that. And of course, there's the great Book of Evil that the mad Arab Al-Azred discovered, called the Necromonicon. And you can see, of course, there are derivatives of that in work by Clive Barker, and also John Carpenter's made reference to a lot of those. And also the Evil Dead even has reference to the Necromonicon and things like that. So it's really become very, very popular. Role-playing games, the Necromonicon is there all over the place. They made reference to a sort of Lovecraftian thing that preceded Lovecraft and inspired Lovecraft in a way, The King in Yellow from True Detective. That Ambrose Bierce and others contributed, as well as Robert Chambers and others. So there's a whole lineage of people from the late 1800s right through into the pulps who contributed to this sort of world of the King in Yellow, Carcosa, this weird world that's not in our world. It's maybe another dimension. It's this planet that's got 2 moons, all this weird stuff. And so what Lumley did, and this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but I think you know what's going on here when I say this. He was successful in taking his love of Stoker and the vampire stuff, right? And you can see, right? You got a vampire skull right there. So a lot of these covers are very vampire oriented. The second one for Vampiri is basically like a vampire bat skull thing. It's really cool. But he was able to weave that together with Lovecraft stuff and the Cthulhu mythos and made it massive. And he wove the mathematics into it. And as a guy who worked at the Outer Limits, I was there when they were starting the Stargate series. So they were bringing in potential employees. And I used to have conversations with these guys who were waiting to do interviews with Brad Wright and Jonathan Glassner. And we would talk about science. And we'd talk about time travel. And there's a term, you might be familiar with this from the book, The Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. There's something called the Tesseract. And the Tesseract is essentially... within science fiction circles, or even science fact circles, it's the idea of a wormhole or a gravity well. And so Lumley with mathematics, and he doesn't go super hard in the mathematics, but there's enough there to make you sit there and go, okay, let me figure this out. Like he puts it in the books. It's pretty cool. And he wasn't a trained mathematician, which is wild. So he was a really smart guy. So let me give you a little bit of the intro of this. And just read to you the start of this, Necroscope by Brian Lumley. Prologue. The hotel was big and rather famous, ostentatious, if not downright flamboyant. Within easy walking distance of Whitehall, and not entirely what it seemed to be. Its top floor was totally given over to a company of international entrepreneurs, which was the sum total of the hotel manager's knowledge about it. The occupants of that unknown upper region had their own elevator at the rear of the building, private stairs also at the rear, and entirely closed off from the hotel staff, even their own fire escape. Indeed, they being the only identification one might reasonably apply in such circumstances, owned the top floor, and so fell entirely outside the hotel's sphere of control and fell outside of its operation. Except that from the outside looking in, few would suspect that the building in toto was anything other than what it purported to be, which was exactly the guise or aspect or lack of such. Well, this is exactly what they wished to convey. As for the international entrepreneurs, whichever such creatures might be, they were not. In fact, they were a branch of government, or more properly, a subsidiary body. Government supported them in the way a tree supports a small creeper, but their roots were wholly separate. And similarly, because they were a very thin, tiny parasite, the vast bulk of the tree was totally unaware of their presence. As is the case with many entrepreneurial, unproven projects, their funding was of a low priority and came out of petty cash. The upkeep of their offices was therefore far and away top of the list where costing was concerned. But that was unavoidable. For unlike other projects, the nature of this one demanded a very low profile indeed. Its presence in the event of discovery would be an acute embarrassment, It would doubtless be viewed with suspicion and scorn, if not disbelief and downright hostility. It would be seen as a totally unnecessary expenditure, a needless burden on the taxpayer, a complete waste of public money, nor would there be any justifying it. The benefits or fruits of its being remained as yet entirely conjectural, and the mildest frost would certainly put an end to it. The same principles apply to any such organization or service. It must A, be seen to be effective, while paradoxically B, maintaining its cloak of invisibility, its anonymity. Ergo, to expose such a body is to kill it. Another way to dispose of this sort of hybrid would be, quite simply, to tear up its roots and deny it had ever existed, or wait for them to be torn up by some outside agency and then fail to replant them. 3 days ago, there had occurred just such an uprooting. I'll pause it right there. That's the opening. Get this book. It's great. So if you like spy stories, if you like Cold War spy stuff, I mean, it's going to pull you right in. That's how it starts. It's a Cold War story. These guys are spies, right? They're working for the government. They're a branch that can't be seen. Now, give you a heads up, what they're trying to do is communicate with the dead to get secrets. Pretty cool. Spy secrets, Cold War. Got a body, try to communicate with the dead. It's great. So, Brian Lumley, honor to Brian Lumley. Look at this list. House of Doors, great stuff as well. Great collections. If you want to start something off, you can go with one of his collections. Look at all these books. Now, if you get the opportunity and you can go over to YouTube, I want to recommend to you once more, and I'm going to type it in while I go. And Abe, I don't know if you're watching, but I'm gonna bring people over to your site. The worst thing about new books. So this is the guy I watch. He's got Huntington's disease, Abe does, and he goes strong. He's so great. He's such an interesting dude. You got there my 6th top 10 short stories, my 7th top 10 short stories. So those are some of his lists. That's from a month ago. And he's been reading a collection of early Brian Lumley stories. Brian Lumley's The Hymn. You got Brian Lumley's The Second Wish. He also reviews some of his favorite video games, right? He reviews on Saturdays, he does Serial Saturdays, where he reviews the old style serials or Doctor Who from the black and white era. So Abe is great. Check him out. That's the name of the channel, The Worst Thing About New Books. So if you want to see some of his reviews of Brian Lumley's stories, head on over there and subscribe. He's great. He passed 2,000 subscribers earlier in the year. He's about 2,680 subscribers now. And I just pray he's all set as far as his soul, his spirit. He's a Christian. And I often comment, you'll see my comments under former Star Trek writing fellow. And he, as I mentioned before, he knew because someone, I think it was his mother, got Huntington's disease. And so he opted not to have children because he didn't want to pass on the disease. And he's starting to be affected by it. So, you know, sometimes you'll see that. But he's a blast. He's so much fun. Really interesting guy. And so I hope you'll check him out. The Worst Thing About New Books. A second recommendation for you. And Abe, I don't know if you're watching, but I would love to have you on the show. And, you know, he plays with D&D groups and stuff like that. I know he's a really busy guy. But I'd love to have you on for an interview, Abe, and just give you the tip of the hat for inspiring me to really get involved here, along with a couple other booktubers. And if you ever get the chance, you know, turn on that camera and come on in. We'll talk about Brian Lumley sometime. But also, he knows tons about Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft and stuff like that. And I think it was Lovecraft was one of his first loves in reading. But I also want to mention that there are some very interesting medical breakthroughs for Huntington's. They're in the human trial phase for Huntington's on some very promising drugs. I got really interested when I was watching Abe, and I thought, man, I want to find out some information. So Abe, if you're watching, obviously you'll be checking in with your doctors and stuff like that. But, you know, maybe just go over to like Grok and, you know, ask about some of the latest information and ask for links. And that might be a good resource to open things up for you. You're probably already on top of it and don't need me to say it. But anyway, And I don't even know if he's going to see this, but Abe's just super, super cool. I love Abe's stuff. And there are a lot of great booktubers out there, but I wanted to mention him again. So there's Abe. Maybe sometime I'll play a little bit of one of his reviews. But for now, I'm going to wrap things up and recommend again, check out Brian Lumley's stuff. Rest in peace, Brian Lumley. Thank you for being there. Thank you for including the mathematics and some of the hard science in your stories. That's very cool. And we'll check in and say hi to everybody over here inside the chats as we close off this booktube segment of Liberty Conspiracy. Oh, they're talking about the Scholastic Book Club, Wrinkle in Time. Those were great days. In New Hampshire, the town of Nashua, which a lot of people out of state called Nashua, they had the bookmobile. And for a summer or a couple summers, they used to project films on a screen on the side of the bookmobile. So I got to see Dracula, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, on the hill near a cemetery. It was amazing. My dad and I got to see Planet of the Apes in a park and just bring in folding chairs. It was awesome. We had such a blast. So many great movies that we got to see. It was great. All right, I better get going. Tiger's Den is coming up, everybody, very soon. Go to Tiger's Den is over on Rumble. Angry Tiger's Den. Look them up. Look up Angry Tiger's Den on X. It's going to be talking economics. We'll look at the Federal Reserve information. And if you're watching BookTube and you're interested in the philosophy, libertarian philosophy, hardcore libertarian economics, that's what I did when I left LA. I started lecturing in political economics, political philosophy, and history and things like that, constitutional information. Just check out the Liberty Conspiracy channel and spread the word. And again, as we approach the end of the month, everybody, if you like what you're seeing, please consider becoming a paid supporter at my Substack. That's a great way to do it. For a few bucks a month, you'll get all that extra information with the daily news notes. You can subscribe over at Rumble. That's a great way to do it as well. And of course, you can always offer a donation. When you get the audios at the Substack, the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, at the bottom, you'll see my PayPal link if you want to do anything like that too. So there you go. And don't forget, we're going to be starting Liberty Conspiracy Publishing. I'm weaving some of my stuff into sort of act in a way, and I didn't intend it to be this way. It's just the way that I have to do my stories, the way that Brian Lumley has done some of his stuff. So God bless you, Brian. Man, there was never a time when I didn't see Brian Lumley laughing. He was fun. What a good guy. Can still, with that bass, that baritone voice. He was great. All right, I'm going to leave you with a little music. We had Shriek back going before. And what's it going to be this time? Let's go with, let's go with...
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the outer limits.